Hey guys, welcome back to our 8th week with Take 10. My name's Maddie, and today we don't have a typical lesson planned. We are actually going to be playing Jeopardy to review what we've learned so far. But before we do that, I have a little bit of an icebreaker. It's not our typical question, but what I want you to do is just turn to the person next to you and tell them one good thing that's happened to you in the past week or so. Just one good thing. It could be you got to eat one of your favorite meals, you got to see a friend, you did really well on a math test, anything like that. Just one good thing. So go ahead, pause the video, share your one good thing, and then come back. Okay, so my one good thing is that last night I had a really fun night with my family, and we got to play euchre, which is my favorite card game, and we had ice cream, and it was a lot of fun. So that's my one good thing. I hope you guys were able to think of something, and I wish I could have heard what you said, but hopefully you're all having a good week. So now, on to Jeopardy. So how we'll need this to work is first I'm going to need you guys to split up into 2 teams. So if your teacher is there, they can go ahead, divide you guys up however you want to, but try and make 2 even teams. Okay, so in just a second I'll have you guys pause the video and do that, but I'm going to give a few more instructions first. So normally I'm there with you in person and I can be the judge of your answers. But because I am not there, I'm going to need someone to help me out a little bit. So if your teacher is able to do that, that would be wonderful. And I'll just need them to kind of judge your answers. I'll give a sample answer, but some of the questions require you to give examples. And most likely you won't give the exact same example I did. So if your teacher's there and they can be a judge of your answers, that would be great. If for some reason your teacher can't do that, I need you guys to appoint a student who can be the judge. Okay, so now I'm going to have you guys go ahead and pause the video, divide up into your 2 teams and get situated. You'll want to kind of separate the 2 teams so you don't have talking between them and you can't overhear what the other team's talking about, because you do have the chance to steal. Okay, and I also need someone to keep score. All right, so I want you guys to go ahead, figure out who's going to be the judge. If you can have a scorekeeper, and then divide up into your 2 teams, and then come back. Okay, so hopefully you guys are all situated now. You have your 2 teams, your scorekeeper, your judge, and you kind of separated your 2 teams. So how this is gonna work, we're gonna have team 1 and team 2. And the questions will alternate every other, so team 1 will get the first question, and then team 2 will get the second question. You guys will have 15 seconds to answer each question, and if the one team does not answer correctly, the other team has the opportunity to rebound and essentially steal those points if they can answer correctly, and they would also have 15 seconds for that. So how this is gonna go down, I'll ask a question and we're just going to go in order since I'm not there to have you guys pick which questions you want. And so we'll go in order. I'll ask a question. I'll make sure to say the team whose question it is. I'll give you your 15 seconds to answer. And then if for some reason that team doesn't get the answer right, I'm going to need you guys to probably pause the video and give the other team a chance to answer the question and then resume after they've done so. Make sense? Okay, good. I know this isn't the ideal way we usually play Jeopardy, but we're going to make it work. And I have my stopwatch here to keep track of the time. All right, so let's get started. Okay, so here are our 5 categories, and I'm sure you'll recognize them. They are the names of the 5 chapters we've gone over. Questions are worth 100, 200, 300, 400, or 500 points, and the point value does vary based on the difficulty of the question. All right, so I'm just going to start with Chapter 1, Conflict and Violence, and work my way down the column. So, Team 1, this is your question. Conflict and violence for 100 points. What is the definition of conflict? And your 15 seconds starts now. Okay, so hopefully you guys remembered that conflict is a disagreement. All right, so if you guys got that right, go ahead and give Team 1 100 points. All right, and Team 2, now it is your turn. Conflict and violence for 200. So your question, Team 2, is what is the definition of violence? Ready, go. All right, so Team 2, the definition of violence is anything that harms yourself, someone else, or a place or a thing. All right, back to Team 1 for question 3. Conflict and violence for 300. What is the Take 10 strategy? All right, the Take 10 strategy is talk it out, walk it out, wait it out. All right, so if you guys got that right, 300 points for you. And Team 2, back to you. Conflict and violence for 400. Is conflict always bad? Explain why or why not. All right, so conflict is not always bad. If you guys remember back to chapter 1, we talked about how conflict can be good in that it's an opportunity for positive change. You can change relationships, you can come up with new ideas, foster creativity. Those were just a few of the ways we said in which conflict can be good. So if you guys knew that conflict wasn't always bad and came up with at least one kind of example of why conflict is not always bad and can be good, go ahead and give yourself 400 points for that. All right, back to Team 1. Conflict and violence for 500. Where does the name Take 10 come from? So I'm going to give a little bit more explanation for this question. So it comes from a certain slogan, take 10 blank, take 10 blank, and take 10 blank. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and give you guys your 15 seconds to think about that. Okay, so take 10 comes from take 10 deep breaths before saying something that hurts, take 10 steps back before getting involved in a fight, and take 10 seconds to think before using something as a weapon. So that one's a little bit trickier, but that's why it's worth 500. So Team 1, if you got 500 points, go ahead and give yourself that. Or Team 2, if you happen to rebound those points, give yourself your 500. All right. And now we have finished with Chapter 1, Conflict and Violence, and we are on to Chapter 2, Values and Principles. So it is Team 2's turn for question 1. All right, values and principles for 100 points. What are values? All right, so values are the things that are important and good in life. Hopefully you guys remembered that one. All right, then we are back to Team 1 for values and principles for 200. And your question, very similar, what are principles? All right, so principles are the rules or guidelines by which we live our lives. There are thoughts and beliefs about what is right and wrong. So then we are back to Team 2. Team 2, your question for values and principles for 300 is, what is an example of a value? So if you remember, your last question was, what is the definition of a value? And we said things that are important and good in life. So now if you guys can think of an example. Okay, so examples of values include family, friends, education. Those were the examples I gave when we talked about values and principles, but this is where that judge really needs to come in and decide if the example you gave is a good example of a value. All right, so I'm gonna leave that up to the judge, but hopefully you guys came up with a good example and earned your 300 points. All right, so now Team 1 for 400. All right, values and principles for 400. What is an example of a principle? So if you guys remember, your last question was the definition of a principle, and you hopefully said that a principle is a rule or guideline by which we live our life and our beliefs about what is right and wrong. So now try and think of an example of that. All right, so examples of a principle could be lying is wrong, loyalty is important, anything like that. So again, judge, I'm giving you some control here, and it's up to you to decide if they came up with a good example. All right, so now we are to Team 2, values and principles for 500. What influences our values? All right, and there are lots of different possible answers here. You guys really only need to come up with one, but if you come up with a few, that would be great. All right, so things that influence our values are family, friends, religion, culture, economic status, anything like that. Oh, and experiences, that's a big one too. So hopefully you guys come up with something similar with your examples. All right, so now we are back to Team 1 for 100 points, fair and assertive behavior. Your question is, what are the 4 types of behavior according to Take 10? Okay, so hopefully that was enough time for you guys. Now this is a little bit of a longer question, but the 4 types of behavior according to Take 10 are passive, aggressive, passive-aggressive, and assertive. All right, so now we are back to Team 2, fair and assertive behavior for 200. What is aggressive behavior? And give an example. So aggressive behavior is when you respond to conflict in a violent way. So examples could be threatening words, mean language, harsh language, physical violence too, so punching, kicking, anything like that could be considered an example. All right, so now back to Team 1 for question 3. Fair and assertive behavior for 300. What is passive behavior? And give an example. So passive behavior is when you ignore a conflict. You choose not to respond. So examples could be letting people take advantage of you and just ignoring the situation, not doing anything about it. Hopefully you guys kind of said that. All right, so now team 2, fair and assertive behavior for 400. All right, your question, team 2, is what is assertive behavior? And give an example. All right, so assertive behavior is when you take a stand and you stand up for yourself in a conflict. You are still respectful of everyone involved and you work towards a solution. So examples, standing up for yourself, communicating, those are anything like that would work. All right, so then we are back to team 1 for fair and assertive behavior for 500 points. What is passive-aggressive behavior? And give an example. All right, so passive-aggressive behavior is behavior that at first appears passive, but it's discreetly aggressive. It's sneaky, it's undermining, it's marked by an intent to offend. And so an example, the 2 big ones we talked about were the silent treatment and also backhanded compliments. All right, hopefully you guys got that one. That's a tough question, which is why it's worth 500 points. All right, and then we are to team 2, I believe, for feelings in conflict for 100 points. And your question, team 2, is what is the definition of escalate? So escalate, we said, is to make something worse. We talked about how conflict can escalate, and also we said anger can escalate. All right, so then back to team 1, feelings in conflict for 200. True or false? Every person has the right to feel however they feel. All right, so that is true. That statement is one of our Take 10 principles. If you remember, we talked about how you can feel however you feel. You have the right to do that. You don't have the right to hurt someone or a thing because of the way you feel. Right. So then we are on to feelings in conflict 300. All right, so this question, what does de-escalate mean? All right, so de-escalate, we said, was a way to kind of bring yourself back down. You de-escalate the conflict, you can de-escalate anger. You try to find a satisfactory end to the conflict. Then on to feelings in conflict for 400. What are anger triggers? All right, so anger triggers are the things that make us angry, upset, and we gave some examples. I talked about how car troubles, or someone chewing with their mouth open, or someone insulting my family were examples of anger triggers for me, and you guys came up with some of your own. but all you really needed to answer this question was just that they're things that make us mad. All right, and then finally, feelings in conflict for 500. I believe this is Team 2's question. All right, what are some de-escalation strategies? Okay, so de-escalation strategies. We talked about talk it out, walk it out, wait it out. We also talked about listening to music, going for a run. I like to hang out with my dog, and I think you guys came up with some of your own too. So any example like that, your judge will decide if you guys came up with some good examples and earned your 500 points. All right, so then we are on to our last category, effective communication. And so I believe we're back to Team 1 for 100 points. All right, Team 1, what is communication? Alright, so hopefully you remembered that communication is a way of conveying meaning from one group to another using symbols. So we talked about lots of examples of communication. We said it could be texting, conversation, anything like that. Sign language was another example. Right. So, question 2, we are back to Team 2. What are I statements? Alright, so hopefully you guys remembered we said that I statements are ways in which you can express yourself in conflict that focus on your own feelings and don't place blame on the other person. Alright, effective communication for 300 is going to go to Team 1. And your question is, give an example of an I statement. Alright, so your judge is going to have to really do the ruling here since I'm not there. But one example of an I statement would be, I feel upset when you hang out with your other friends instead of me because it makes me feel left out. Or something like that. But really the key parts here are I feel blank and when blank. If you had that because in there, that's great too. But really to get the points you just need the I feel and the when part of things. So then Team 2, your question. Effective communication for 400. In addition to speaking, what is another way that we communicate non-verbally? So ways in which we can communicate non-verbally include body language, tone, facial expression, eye contact, anything like that would work just fine. All right, and then our last question goes to Team 1, and it is effective communication for 500. So your question is, give 3 examples of good communication skills. All right, so some examples of good communication skills, eye contact, asking questions, paying attention and not thinking of other things in your head, leaning in, nodding, anything like that would work. We talked about some other examples, but if you guys came up with some other good examples that we haven't talked about, your judge can decide whether or not you have earned your 500 points. All right, and so that was our last question. So good job to you. Okay, so thanks so much for playing Jeopardy. I know it wasn't the ideal way to play, but hopefully it worked out okay for you guys and it went smoothly. But thank you so much for playing. And normally the winning team I would bring in candy for, but I'm not able to do that. So hopefully you guys can think of some way to reward yourselves. But I will just give you a round of applause to all of you for participating, and I will see you guys next week. Have a great day.